Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to part 2 of this Q&A video mini-series that I've been doing, and I think this is one of the most important videos that I've ever done. There's a lot of insight and information packed into these answers, and I've gone through the work of sifting through the hundreds of them to try to pick out the ones that I think will be most important for you guys. So if you didn't check out part 1 of that video, make sure to click on the link in the description of this video. That one talked about whether we'll ever see a trading system, whether we will see what sort of solution for duplicate heroes we'll see, so some really important stuff. And then this video, we talked about whether we'll ever see hero reset tokens. We talked about new stronghold levels and new buildings, new features and events for within your alliance, and a lot of stuff that I think is really important for the enjoyment of this game and kind of an understanding of where it's headed. So be sure to stick around towards the end of that video. These questions are in no particular order. So if you want to get all that information, make sure you stick around. So if you haven't tried Gemstone Legends yet, come check it out and play alongside me. It's another really fun and deep strategy RPG like Empires and Puzzles, but with some fun new twists, and a lot of people from Empires and Puzzles have already joined. Not only can you help out the channel by using the download link in the description of this video, but if you enter the code #Spock_2021 in the global chat, you can get a nice starter bonus including gold, gems, gold scrolls, and a free epic hero Elidor, all valued at about $50. Once you join, you'll also get access to a set of beginner events where you can earn another epic hero Soliana, a 5-star legendary set of equipment, which is what you use to boost the stats and performance of your heroes, and a platinum scroll for another epic or legendary hero in the game. Those links and codes are in the description down below. Just be sure to enter that code in the global chat after finishing the tutorial within 24 hours of downloading the game, and I look forward to seeing you all there. So, for the first question, so again, just a reminder that these are in no particular order. I just went through the order that they were presented in. So make sure you stick around to the end because it's possible that stuff you would find more important could be included later on. So first up, raiding teammates is a great addition. Small flaw. Is there a way to add the war game feature to these raids? It would really allow players to then truly test their defenses. So basically, is it possible to raid someone with the rush attack modifier on, with the minion thing on? And it's a great question, and I think this really epitomizes how, from the individual player sort of viewer perspective, you're like, oh, it's easy. They already have this for war. Just flip the switch and turn it on. And I think this is an indication that there can be a lot more that goes into these things, and sometimes what seems like it could be simple for us, not being, coders or programmers ourselves or developers, it's not always the same. So you can see that in the answer here. Whoa, that's a much bigger task than one probably realizes. It'd be automatically assigned as being a really expensive quality of life feature when compared to many, many others. So a few things being said here. One, it's probably not going to happen. Two, it gives some evidence to the fact that some of these things can be a lot more complicated than they seem based on how they have the game structured. And so I thought there was some value in including that. One, it says that this probably isn't going to happen. So it would be nice to be able to test things out that way, but I think we have to rely on watching other people's war videos, doing some testing during wars ourselves, perhaps using a test team in a tournament to see how it does. We do have some options at our disposal, but it won't be as convenient as we might hope for. So next up, lastly, are there any new ways to play more with your alliance mates being worked on? I think this is mainly why we all stay, because of the friendships we have made through the game. War is fun, we can cheer each other on. Mythic Titan was good, and however, in my opinion, there needs to be more levels of rewards in the team aspect. So that's kind of a different story, but basically saying a lot of people stay for the alliance interactions. Are there more ways that we can lean on that? And something that's in the answer is, I think alliances are a hugely important feature for them retaining players, and they know that, and that's apparent in the answer here. So it's sort of interesting to see evidence for that, because I think they are if you're trying to make a successful game, you're sort of afraid of the idea of players leaving. And if you realize what reasons they stick around for, then you're going to put more resources into that. And that is something we're seeing. So we're working very soon on variations of a challenge event called Alliance Event. So that's one thing. In general, we absolutely agree on this notion, and that's why the Alliance Event was something we did already for Puzzle Combat, and now we want to have an ENP this year. So I didn't cover this question later on, but they do clarify that Puzzle Combat and Empires and Puzzles, while they're both games of Small Giant Games, they're run by separate teams. So don't be afraid that them developing more in Puzzle Combat means less happening in Empires and Puzzles. They have clarified those things are independent. So yeah, it'd be great to add more Alliance activities and functionality. When you think about quality of life and more expensive features, those things are really high. But I think the fact that there's already an event developed shows that they realize it's important. So it is expensive, but it's probably the best. I think alliances are the best glue for keeping players in the game, because you start to care about the friendships that you make. In Gemstone Legends, they have similar type of events. They call them guilds there instead of alliances. And they have these events where you're working together towards common goals, kind of like the Mythic Titan thing. But the Mythic Titan thing, the team aspect at least, I don't think that many people do anything differently. So it's just kind of there. In Gemstone Legends, it's cool that there's these events where you really all have to contribute towards a common goal, and you get incremental resources as you do that. So I'd be happy to see something like that come to Empires and Puzzles as well. Just wanted to point out that that is something being done in other games, so it's not some revolutionary idea. Okay, can we expect more buildings? So we've been a bit quiet on new buildings for a while. We've done some work on an expedition building, but wrapping that up probably goes to next year. Similarly, we have something cool already done for a museum, but I'm fairly sure that's not going to the game this year. So yeah, we have plenty of plans here, some even quite huge or super huge, but we've pretty much put all of these on the side for the moment. I'm really hoping we get to some of these next year. Doesn't sound very promising, but it's interesting to see that work has gone into this. The first thing that comes to mind is like Salmon Loki. We saw the hero card for that a while ago, and I covered it in a pretty old episode of Beta Breakdown. That hero got turned into Bira, which was new art, slightly different concept for that card, and now we're seeing Salmon Loki come back after Season 3 is already done, which makes me think they don't like to waste resources they've already spent. So you could speculate a couple things from that. One, that if they've put work into these buildings, that we will see them eventually. They didn't rule them out. They just were like, there's better priorities that we could do sooner, which probably means, paid events and stuff like that. But it also means that they are planning for a longer term, potentially, longevity for the game, which is something that I'm relieved to hear. There's something else that confirms that later on too. Because I think a lot of us are wondering, should I be investing in this game? Is it going to be around for very long? I don't want to spend any money if they're on the way out, who knows? So there are some indications that they are at least planning ahead longer term. So that's a little bit relieving, even though it's a bit of a speculation. So Stronghold, this is the only building that should be built, but that cannot be entered. Why? For example, a storyline or other useful information could be read in this building. Wow, sorry about that. Super loud car. We've had some plans related specifically to this. It would be super logical to get access to some fun stuff like the storyline from somewhere. Yeah, stay tuned. Not super promising. But then the next question, why did you choose to let us upgrade 3 of the 4 food storages to advanced, 3 of the 5 of iron, 1 of the house, and so on? Why not upgrade all of them? And he says, who said we've reached the maximum stronghold level yet? If and when we release that, we'll increase the max of advanced storages. So more stronghold levels coming soon, which probably means that will give us access to something else. I suppose it could just mean that you get more advanced storages, which could mean that you can hold more resources. That would not be too exciting, and I don't think that they would put in the work to developing more stronghold levels just to give you more storage. So that may mean it's coming with some of these other buildings too, but they're being sort of vague about it. I wouldn't expect that anytime soon. Have you thought about a reset coin? So this is a question I've been wondering about myself so much and really hoping to see, and they do give a conclusive answer here. Have you thought about a reset coin to get mats back on a hero? It would be an awesome ad and could easily be done as, say, a once-a-year gift. Something you can't win or buy. I think players would really appreciate that small gesture. Answer. We had a big discussion about super reset tokens actually at some point. We ultimately did not take it further, but who knows about the future. We've been looking at some ideas for very useful things, and this is a pretty cool idea as well. So that kind of reads to me like, no, this isn't going to happen. They say who knows about the future because they don't want to totally piss people off maybe. If they say, yeah, it's possible, and it never happens, that does still sound better than, nope, never going to happen. The interesting part is we've been looking at some ideas for very useful things. And this is a pretty cool idea as well. So they're contrasting those useful things against this, saying that those would be different. So I'm not going to get excited about that super vague reference, but it is sort of interesting to try to think about what they may be talking about. So if you have any ideas for what you think that could be, or you enjoy speculating, be sure to add that in the comments down below. And if you haven't already, please hit the like button on this video and consider subscribing as well. Next up, do the beta testers or feedback on the community's opinion have, do the beta testers or feedback on the community's opinion here on the forum have any impact on the development? Really, not the best grammar there. Yeah, the beta does a lot. So people have felt at times that, this is my own answer at this point, people have felt at times that, like, why is beta even there if they're just gonna ignore it? And there's some questions coming up that will answer that even further, but this kind of this is like their statement on what they think about beta, and so I felt there was some value there. We use it basically to confirm if something is good enough to release, and often we go back to the drawing board with things if the opinion strongly points that way. Do note that there are some economy and game direction related things where we do need to move onward with the chosen strategy, even if community opinion would not favor it. But that's super valuable to get a clear indication of this beforehand as well. And as said, we've often adjusted even our strategy based on findings here. So what I'm hearing there is there's certain things we're going to do no matter what, because we have a clear idea of where we want the game to travel over time, and just because people disagree with that doesn't mean that's going to change our opinion. So I think it's important to keep the perspective as a beta tester that you're not on an equal footing necessarily with planning the future of the game. I think the feedback is valuable, and if you feel it's frustrating and they're not listening, then by all means there's no obligation to stay involved with that, but I think it's reasonable to understand the arrangement as, like, they may listen and you're there to try and to push in the direction that you think is good, but ultimately they're the ones making final decisions and they'll do what they think is best. Not the best thing to hear, but it does kind of make sense at the same time. This one just tucked at the bottom if you're curious. They said, someone asked, will there be more global beta events like there were for formations? And they were saying they really liked the global beta thing in the answer, and that they're not ruling out that possibility in the future. So it could happen. Okay, why are the developers keen to introduce features like limit breakers, which 80% of the people polled here feel negatively about? So this goes back to the beta thing too. They're open to feedback, but that doesn't mean that they will completely change course based on that feedback, which I think is fair. That it's up to them to take whatever direction they want. And I do think it's possible and likely that they have a clearer idea of where they want the game to travel, and we as players are more sort of in the moment and what's happening now and not thinking about that trajectory. As mentioned earlier, there are some features where the overall direction is in a way set in stone beforehand. So whether that's, because it's dictated to them that this is what needs to happen, or because they are fixated on, we want the trajectory to be this for these reasons and because of this data set that we're looking at. Or at least in the sense that we know where we need to end up in the long term. But there simply is a fairly high chance that players do not see the steps along the way as we do. Limit Breakers is a very clear example of this. We have evaluated that we must raise the maximum evolution cap, so to speak, of heroes at this stage of the game life cycle, and thus we set this as a non-debatable goal. There is a lot in the feature itself we need to test and most likely adjust once it's live, and the beta feedback did inform us of the pain points, definitely, but in this case we realize that we'll learn what exactly needs to be adjusted only when it's played by a large enough population. So I think what they're talking about adjusting is not what will be gained by limit breakers, but how limit breakers will land in the game. For example, there is this defense buff that we've seen, 20% boost to attack and defense for all defending heroes. They're open to adjusting that because I think as the most powerful heroes in the game get the possibility of leveling up even higher, it won't be relevant for them to have the same 20% boost on defense that season 1 heroes without limit breaks do, right? So I think that's a good sign. I'm personally not totally opposed to the lifted evolution cap with limit breakers. It'll be really unfortunate if we're going to see these ethers on sale in this current seasonal event calendar, because there's been nothing mentioned about these being items that are for sale. But someone pointed out that us being able to only get 4 of the Ether 3s, which are for legendary heroes, and you need 5, as the perfect way to segue into selling deals, because you get this psychological response where you're like, oh, I'm so close. What are the chances of actually getting this? How great would it be if I had this? Oh, there's a deal. I guess I'll buy it, So I don't love that aspect, and I think there can be some manipulative tendencies in there. I don't think it's limited to this game or this company by any means, but it's still unfortunate nonetheless to spot something like that, and it doesn't just seem like a coincidence that you're only getting 4 out of 5. So that does not mean that we can say that's definitely what's happening. It's possible they don't want it to hit just yet. They want it to have a more gradual release, and so these are going to be part of war rewards as well as tournament rewards. So that means some people will get all 4 from the quest, and then we'll get 1 more from war loot or from tournament loot, and then they can roll out the limit breaker thing slowly. So I think it's really important that just because something seems likely, like, oh, of course they're just trying to rip us off, they're greedy, blah, 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 that may be true, but it can't be stated as a fact because we simply don't know. And it's one thing to feel strongly about that, but I'm just trying to point out that that's not a guarantee of any kind. So, next question. Why do the devs/game designers keep forcing content out which nobody wants or requests, but ignores the innumerable features that players do want and repeatedly ask for? As mentioned earlier, a lot of the content we decide to focus on is informed by the patterns we see in the entire player population, and when looking at how to keep the majority of players engaged over the long term. This does not necessarily always align with the feedback we get from the players, and there we must often rely on the science and business parameters, if you will, instead of focusing on individual opinions. We may, for example, see that if we do not have enough new, sufficiently powerful heroes and events introduced at a regular enough pace, the players as a group start to lose interest in things, and this may be a much stronger reaction than what we see whenever we do something more quality of life centric. So these things affect our priorities heavily. We'd love to focus on certain things. Most of us play the game still actively every day, and we have no special developer accounts or anything. But this burden of knowledge where we nearly daily have to remind us what's the order of importance to ensure we have a really solid roadmap for years ahead. So I think that's a mixed bag. I think there do seem to be signs of greed within the company, which is, something exhibited by any large company. Once you start acquiring a lot of money, you're focused on doing that more. And so I don't think that's, unique to them. But I think there is definitely genuine truth to the trying to set a long trajectory for a game. And so I don't think that's just a total bullshit answer. I don't think that means that they're not greedy or anything, but I think I don't think it's always one thing or the other. I think it's sometimes a really nuanced blend of multiple things. So up to you what you draw from that. That's my own personal point of view. And it's disappointing at times, but I do think it's very true that, they need at least a certain amount of money to keep the game going. I don't know what that is, and I do believe it's true that events generate way more money than quality of life changes. I think there needs to be a balance where you can't ignore one in favor of the other, and they maybe seem too focused on events over quality of life stuff. But anyways, this gives more of their basis behind what they're thinking, and I think there is value in that. Okay, next up. So I tried to squeeze all of this on one screen because there was a lot going on. Do you play the game? What are your favorite heroes, combinations, gameplay, features? Yeah, I play Empires and Puzzles and Puzzle Combat both daily, not super duper actively. So just all of the Titans, Wars, and important quests and so on, but it still takes a chunk of every day. I run with a fairly low-key set of legendaries. So there's a lot of things as I'm reading through this that make it seem like they're not that engaged in the game, but they want to seem like they are. So let me know if you have the same conclusion from this. I run with a fairly low-key set of legendaries, so it's kind of like acting as if that is like an intended choice as opposed to just a byproduct of not being that involved in the game. Costume, though, in my lineup, I personally like luck as a gameplay element, so I've been really happy with Rumpelstiltskin and Hell. Hell has nothing to do with luck. Hell is a point and shoot. She freezes the targets that you aim her at, so I don't understand what they're talking about there. Rumpelstiltskin is definitely a luck-based or, chance-based hero, which are the ones that I really don't like, and I feel like most dedicated players don't like that because there are plenty of chances that doesn't go the way that you intend it to or want it to. So there's a lot of elements here that make this person seem like a very casual player who's sort of masquerading as a by choice, not super involved expert. I've got none of the top tier meta heroes. Okay, suspicious. I've got a pretty limited monthly summon budget, but that's okay. And while I can't compete in the meta, my super wide roster of all kinds of stuff works great for the tournaments, which I really, really like. Okay. I'm currently taking a small break from Empires and Puzzles, which means I haven't played it all in the last 6 months. This is my speculation. As I've been lately really busy with development work. For my own roster, my favorite heroes include Onatel, Marjana's costume, Sartana's costume, Tyr, and Kunshin. What a weird list of heroes. Not that any of those are bad heroes, but it doesn't strike me as a very... as a player that's as adept as I would expect for someone who works for the company. So there's nothing wrong with any of those heroes, but it's a strange answer for someone who's on the inside, and there's not any synergy there. It's a sort of bizarre. Something about that answer sits strangely with me as someone who's trying to seem like they play frequently. Onatel is one of my favorite special skills. I was very happy to summon her. I do think she has a cool special skill. Lately, I've been enjoying the tournaments and have a large bench of epic heroes. So this gives you a little insight into how much these people play. They might test a lot more than they play, for example, because I think that has to be done, but sort of a bizarre answer from both of these guys. Not what I would have expected for longer term players. They've been working there, I think, one of them the whole time, and another one for the last few years at least. Okay, what were the reasons for raid formations being locked behind Stronghold level 25 and Hero Academy instead of being widely available? This was a pain point for a lot of people that felt they were at a disadvantage having started the game later and not having these buildings, and it's an interesting answer they gave. So just as a matter of risk management, really, even though the feature is liked and the global beta went great, we'd absolutely hate to find out later on the formations that somehow... Find out later on that the formations somehow made the rating of very, very early players somehow worse. So we erred on the side of caution here. So I think they wanted to create this feature for players who were more bored that had been playing for a while, and they weren't totally certain on how that would land, so they wanted to restrict it from new players so that they didn't screw up their kind of influx cycle of new players. They didn't want us to cause any problems with the influx of new players. got a few more. The longevity of this game is dependent on being able to attract new players when older players retire. At the moment, with a glut of 5-star heroes, emblem classes, costumes, and upcoming Limit Breaker, what is the plan to reduce the chasm and help new players catch up and compete with those who have been playing for 3+ years? The new player's path is something that we will indeed focus on next year, but there's really not much to share on that yet, as we haven't decided on the steps. A point perhaps to make here is that we've got, generally speaking, this is the interesting part to me, an exceptionally low degree of player retiring, which actually is the reason for us to introduce all the mentioned new features. We really, really want to ensure the players who want to get more out of the game after 4 years can do so. It'd be a terrible shame to lose those players, really. So this, I think they went a little too hard on trying to seem concerned about the players. And the way that I'm reading this, which again is purely my own speculation, we really want to ensure that players who want to spend more on the game after 4 years have plenty of options to do so. It'd be a terrible shame to decrease the monetary influx of those players, So maybe that's a bit pessimistic, but I mean, looking at the other answers that we've talked about in the first part of this video, again, check that out if you haven't already. They made it very clear that new events are their priority because it offers the players more, but as you read between the lines of all these answers, it becomes clear that that's what pays the bills and that's what keeps the huge amounts of money coming in. So it's hard to not read everything with that tone, but I think they did make that clear across all these answers. So make sure you watch the part 1 of this in addition, so that you can get that same perspective that I have, and I'm curious if you would agree or disagree with that. Okay, I think this is the last one. Has the introduction of some sort of pity counter ever come up? So that means if you've done 100 summons, you're guaranteed to get a 5-star because you just had bad RNG, and it's a system to protect against bad RNG. We've discussed it, and this is a very murky answer. We've discussed this several times as well, and had even some plans pretty clearly lined up if this would be needed. But I think the math and the economics, at least at the time, did not really support this, since the end result would not really work as it does in some competing games. So vague, so unclear, don't like this answer at all. That being said, a well-implemented pity counter is absolutely not a bad idea, and who knows if we'd eventually get to it. That means no, it's not going to happen, in my opinion. So, really bad answer here, and I think my impression is they don't need to. And there's enough money coming in that they don't have to give out more heroes. If money was really slowing down and this stuff was being demanded across the board and it was harming their revenue because of it, then they would absolutely do these things. But I don't think there's enough pressure at this point, so they're like, why even bother? So be sure to like this video if you didn't already, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. This is the conclusion of this sort of mini-series of videos that I wanted to do talking about this Q&A. For me, it's given a ton of insight about the developers and what kind of things we can expect to see from the game long term, and I think there was some really good value there. So I'm curious if you guys felt the same way. What questions sort of stood out to you, if you felt like there were things that you wish had been answered that hadn't, and just curious to hear your thoughts in general. Sometimes it's just me sitting here making videos, and I wonder what you guys are thinking about this stuff as well, because I think all of our opinions are relevant in terms of trying to figure this stuff out. So share your thoughts in the comment section down below. As I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in trying out a different game that I think is a little bit more player friendly and maybe a little bit less greedy, or less like, well, we're not going to worry about that because we don't have to, then check out Gemstone Legends. They've got a really great development team there and handle these issues quite differently, and I think they're really focused on making a game that players love. So check that out if you hadn't already. The details are in the description of this video, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, it helps support the channel as well. So I appreciate that too, but I think you guys will have fun with that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.